overhead issues, problem after problem. I don't really think Nvidia commands a price premium in my eyes anymore. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. This episode is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com, where you can get Windows 11 Pro for just $23 with offer code Broken Silicon, and then JLC PCB, where you can get $10 off their Flex PCBs through the link below. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing, Tom?
You look very much so like a German scientist in a video game. Like, I feel like,
oh, hello, sir.
You're those glasses, you're in shape now. I feel like you would be one of the people on a radio talking to the lead of the game in Vanquish. Like, you would be one of those people.
Or like not like a tech henchman to the villain of the game, because that could
no
also work,
I don't think you look like that. If you were like a henchman, I would see you as like a guy that like murders women or something, and like, and is in Law and Order SVU, something like that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So but you don't, I'm not getting that kind of creepy vibe, although I feel like that character could look like you. No, I think you're the guy that when you unlock a new gun, again, in like Vanquish or I don't know, Stellar Blade, you would be someone who's like, we've designed this new gun. And I think that's what you look like. Write in below what you think Dan looks like. What character in a video game would he be?
Yeah, sure. Let's go for that.
And I look like not whether good or bad. Like, I think right now I kind of look like the second brother in a kingdom who's really tired. Like, not the guy who's trying to take over, just kind of the guy, he's having a drink. He's not like wasted, but he's like over it. He's over it. He's over the whole civil war in the kingdom. That's what I think.
Sure. You just want to you just want to chill, and like the younger brother's like, let's do this still or something.
Or older, yeah. And I'm the guy in a Game of Thrones season where you hope I eventually betray the evil family, but I probably get killed in the second to last episode of the season or something when they find out I'm going to defect.
I was going to say Connor Roy for a second from Succession, but Connor Roy is also a gigantic moron, so I don't think that's the right
I would
vibe,
hope not. Please, no. But I don't know. I feel like this is high praise for both of us. Maybe I'm being a little braggadocious by thinking I would be the murdered third succession to the throne prince in a Game of Thrones series, and that Dan would get to be the scientist making a gun in Vanquish. But I don't know. We'll see what you guys think. I still, in my opinion, all-time best suggestion is that the all-time funniest reference to how I look is Human Shrek. I will never stop laughing at that idea.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, let's get to corrections. This is not a very serious one, much like our conversation is not very serious right now.
The Bud Light saga continues.
The Bud Light saga continues. Jensen Wang writes in and says, Bud Light is a very important. Sometimes you need water to hydrate between beers.
I agree. I tend to just drink real water instead of piss fodder, but to each their own. Ooh.
Yeah, and you guys may have just heard a little sound effect that I accidentally played while I was preparing a voicemail that we will be listening to soon, but I forgot to put it in before we started. We're really quite all over the place at this point in this episode, and I apologize.
Maybe we can just have more random bass solos in the future too.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've thought about it. I have the ability to play. Like, I thought maybe I could get some like sad violin music when we like read quotes from a CEO about, we're sorry we have to raise prices, or we should think about that. We'll see. I don't know for that type of podcast, but actually to try to stay on some level of the subject at hand. The one thing I will just say about the Bud Light thing, which has become a recurring thing we apparently have to talk about every news episode now, after a bunch of jokes were made about how bad it is. if you're European, don't judge America based on Bud Light, okay?
Yeah.
Right? Don't just like that's the one thing I will say is I think a lot of people, um, whether it's that or maybe even our coffee, don't judge us based on Folgers coffee. Don't judge us based on Starbucks. Don't judge us based on Bud Light. Like
You
most
know,
people aren't drinking those things if they want a good thing, and it's unfortunate that what we export is our worst thing. But that's true of a lot of countries. Like I've seen,
to
um,
single out the Netherlands, you guys make Heineken. Is that really? Come on, is that really better than Bud Light? I
I would
know
choose Heineken over it, but yes, I agree that is not the
it's
second,
not a
third,
different
fourth,
ballpark. I'm
fifth
sorry.
beer I would choose. Yeah.
No, it's not a different ballpark than Bud Light.
Actually, this is funny. My girlfriend recently got a bottle of wine, and she said, "I thought this would be good. It says #1 wine in Argentina." And I
Oh
went,
no,
but doesn't that mean that's the cheapest one they drink?" but
probably.
we could talk about how brands mean different things in different countries all day. I think instead we should move on to a branding that we will never stop laughing at, and that is the GRE branding. With story number one, RX 9070 GRE 16 gigabyte leaked. I'll be honest, this news cycle has been dominated by leaks from this channel. So buckle up. The first one is one of those said leaks from Moore's Law is Dead over the past 2 weeks. In the August Loose Ends live stream specifically, we revealed AMD is planning to release a new global version of the RX 9070 GRE. This was something that was already rumored on a few websites. I noticed as well that they'd have a 16 gigabyte version of what is currently only a 12 gigabyte GPU sold mostly in China and in some pre-builds I've noticed as well. But it was newsworthy because I had the full specs. So here's what it is. Yep, 48 compute units, just like the other GRE, 16 gigabytes instead of 12. But the RAM is slower. It is 18.5 gigabit per second instead of 20, making the memory a little cheaper and also easier to source. Again, I think that's something people miss, like when a new variant of like the RX 580 came out that had slightly less stream processors and also lower memory requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Is that crummy they called it the same GPU? Yes, I'm glad AMD calls this the GRE. But the reason they did it wasn't just to cheap out on memory. It's so that they didn't have to always buy the fastest bin GDDR5 if there was a shortage. You would save them more money by letting people buy the lower spec. So that's what I believe is going on with the slower memory. But I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, considering that this will have 75% the CUDA cores, the compute units of the 9070 XT. So it's like, okay, 92% the memory bandwidth is probably enough for 75% the CUs. But what I think is most interesting, again, recapping, 16 gigabytes, not 12, 48 compute units. So that's like, what, 15% less or something than the 9070 non-GRE. The TDP, I was told it's 230 watts, which is 10 watts higher than the 220 watt TDP of the 9070 non-GRE, and clocks up to 2.9 gigahertz, which is substantially higher peak boost clocks than what you get out of the 9070 non-GRE. So all that put together, you have over 90% of the bandwidth. You actually have a higher TDP, and it's apparently boosting, I don't know, like 10% or more higher than the 9070. I think this thing will just be a cheaper 9070. It won't be as efficient as the 9070, but it will be easier to manufacture, easier to source RAM for, and just use more energy to get you the same performance with worse yields. And I have heard that it will be priced between $450 and $500 most likely, making it priced probably directly against the 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. And so, yeah, I think this is exciting. I mean, you're basically getting near 9070, probably a little worse than 5070 super performance, but for the price of a 5060 Ti 16 gigabyte. The only thing I would say we might need to worry about is how many of these yields really need to be cut down 25%. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was an incredibly high volume. But yeah, what do you think about this, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, this seems good to me. It almost seems more like a 9070 replacement than anything, though, because like I have a little trouble seeing where those two coexist in the market. So you just have a slightly less efficient model that gets more or less the same performance.
Like
That's
10% worse, probably.
yeah, that's a little bit weird. I mean, I guess
Maybe 5%, though. We'll see. I don't know.
I guess if it's priced 5 to like 10% lower to like 15% lower in general,
Well, so
that
here's
might
the
work
thing,
out.
though, right?
That's kind of how they slot things in already.
The 9070 is selling for $600, right? Its MSRP is 550, but it's selling for 600. So if this launches for 450 and it's actually 450, that's on paper 20% lower MSRP and maybe in practice 30% cheaper. So I again, we'll see what happens, but if it actually is priced below 500, I think this thing will be hard to keep in stock. Actually, this will be
Oh
the
yeah,
card
I
to beat
think.
price performance.
Oh, I think this would be a really desirable card. I think it might just make the 9070 look a little, a non-GRE look a little, eh, comparatively, because I don't know. I would pick a slightly less efficient, slightly lower performance if it's that substantially cheaper, especially given that it has 16 gigs of RAM. Like that's, I don't know, gives you a cheaper 16 gig option for a way better price point.
Yeah, the only other thing I can think to add to this is like Carbon Cry did most of the write up, of course. He does the original write up, and then I kind of go through it and just make little notes or tweaks to it before the show. So it was his note, how many of these will they really need to disable? The only thing I could come up with, and we'll see, is if it is widely available and easy to get, therefore it has a ton of volume.
Mm-hmm.
I would wonder if this is coming out as a sort of like a similar idea to why AMD discontinued the 5800 X3D and then kept making the 5700 X3D, even though if anything yields were better. And it's because they wanted to save another $10 in what it takes binning these. And what if the
Sure.
48 compute unit thing, what is that then? How many more work groups? Like 6 more work groups, right? No, wait.
Compared to the
that's 4 more work
XT?
groups. The non-XT. They're disabling 4 extra work groups, 8 compute units versus the 9070 non-XT. That's just 1 more per shader engine. So I wonder if it's a situation because there's like 4 engines, I believe, or whatever, or quadrants to the GPU. That'd be 1 more per of those. I wonder if what this would be is instead of binning which CUs can hit which clocks, they're just like, we disable any of them that can't clock high really quickly. And this saves money binning to just capture that. And then also we're lowering the memory spec. So maybe it's just a different way of binning to just save that extra bit of money so they can sell it long term lower than $600. I don't know. Throwing that out there. Who knows though?
Which, yeah, if that's the case, that sounds more like it's kind of a soft cancellation of the 9070 then, right?
Which I wouldn't say that's what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Or,
you wouldn't say for certain that's what's going on.
Or maybe there's like a lot of edge cases where like a yield that is almost good enough to be a 9070 isn't, and like they want to make it easier to just go yes or no, and then disable another 4 work groups and say, all right, this goes over here. We're not going to make this be like a 9070 that uses more energy. Should we validate it or not? We're just going to make this easy on ourselves and capture more of the yields for the cheap one. I don't know. I guess that's what I would suggest. But I could be completely speculating nonsense right now. That's just all I can come up with. Because it is, again, it is weird. They already have a 12 gigabyte yield. They already have, incredible yield rates on TSMC 4 nanometer. So I would wonder how many of these with the die size this big really need to be cut down that much. But we'll see.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I guess if it makes the binning process overall easier, maybe just accepting that somewhat lower CU count is acceptable, though.
Yeah. Planet 9 writes in and says, I like RPX for the naming of whatever AMD has to do to rename their graphics cards after the 9000 series. Specifically, I like it because it would be Radeon path tracing and he says X's experience. Yeah, I don't know.
After Sony's Xperia brand.
Yes, which is doing great, right? But with Zen, I knock it as I think Xperias are.
I know
cool. I heard
you have an Xperia, right?
Yeah, I actually heard their most recent one had a ton of software issues though. So. But with Zen now also at 9000 series, what would you pitch as a perfect combo to allow RPX dedicated cards and Ryzen blank APUs co-branding into a unified product naming scheme? Because I sure hope they walk back from AI. Yeah, I mean, look, the AI branding hasn't done a lot for them from what I've been told at retail. So that is why I think they will go with something besides AI for the next generation of graphics cards, whatever they have to do. But I think they're going to keep AI for CPU. I don't think path tracing branding for a CPU makes any sense whatsoever.
I mean, AMD likes to get at least 2 generations out of their branding, so we'll probably get another AI gen. I mean, I could see them axing it quickly given how much it failed, but I think it is good for SEO optimization. So
I do
that
too.
and like having the Max and Plus in their names because
So
a
if you
bunch of other
Google a MacBook, you
CPUs,
might see AMD's
yeah,
offering.
like
Yeah.
next generation, they call it the AMD AI Mac 490 Max Plus or so. No, but the one thing I will say is I still not sure how I feel about the idea of them unifying the branding of their CPUs and GPUs.
Well,
Unless,
they kind of tried that, right, with R9
yeah, they have.
290X, and I don't think it really did anything for them.
I think it just makes their product stacks more confusing. Get it with them just having two that have almost the same name. I'm personally not in favor of that, even if they think it might be kind of cute to do it. But we'll see. I mean, if APUs become more and more of their more and more of like what their brand is, I think it could make sense. But I don't know if they still have like if they have CPUs, APUs, and GPUs all at once, having those all under one unified naming schemes kind of just seems more confusing than anything to me.
I agree. And what are they at now? 300 with Strix and 400 will, I believe. Did we confirm that? That it was 400, I think, for Gorgon Point, that we saw
I,
that or
I
something.
think we did.
Yeah. I'm already forgetting, but so then you would conceivably Medusa and Zen 6 would be 500, and then you probably have like a 600 that's like Medusa Halo or something else, whatever, after that, and then Zen 7. So it's something where they can, they're already kind of halfway through it, and I would suggest they just keep doing the AI branding, because what's more confusing is when they change it. Not, like, I actually loved the naming scheme they had from Renoir, which was, I believe, the 4000 series, all the way through Hawk Point, which, because you could just go 8, 9, like you could tell how many
Mm-hmm.
cores, what architecture. It was great. Like 7735HS, perfect. 7 is the like tier of performance, 3s and 3, 5. That was great. And I think right when everyone was used to that naming scheme is when they changed it again. And so I think it takes time for things to set in, as dumb or not dumb as the naming is. And I'd say just change the name again in 4 years once you get to 900 anyways. And don't,
Yeah.
you made the dumb decision, but it is I can quickly kind of see what the product is with it anyway. So I wouldn't change it now. I mean, what are they going to
Or,
change it to? Come on.
oh, well, I mean, I think they should take to the name of, or take to the advice of your Discord users and come up with like AI puns. That would be where I would go with the
I mean,
branding.
like half of our Patreon supporters' names now have AI in their name as much as
Like,
possible to
I'm
make fun
like
of AI being in everything.
Lay Isa Sue. Maybe we could go with that. I'm surprised there's no Lay Isa Sue at this point, but
Yeah.
we do have a Jensen AI Wang somewhere, if I'm remembering correctly.
We do. We do. But yeah, and again, when it comes to like branding for Radeon, I am very sure that RPX would work. I really,
Yeah.
really, really, or maybe at PTX, but in hindsight, I think RPX is better. Radeon path tracing, it immediately makes you go, wait, don't you mean RTX? And then you go, no, RPX. What's that? Well, they do path tracing. Like, you can see the conversation itself. The main thing I worry about is if they will do the same stupid thing they did, where RX 5000, 5700, that was all fine, but that should have been the 1700 XT, and then now they would be around where Nvidia's is, and they wouldn't have to start over again. As I really hope they do RPX like 1090 XTX or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, because, like, I'm just being honest, there's a part of me that's really worried they will immediately go to 7000 so they can say it's bigger than Nvidia's 6000 series. I really hope that type of childish crap doesn't happen again.
Uh, but don't be surprised if it does.
And then they just get another. Well, I mean, it would be what AMD does, right? Then they only get 3 or 4 more generations, 2 or 4 more generations out of it again, depending on how you look at
Or
it.
what if they go with 90,000 or something, and then it's like like
100.
13x10.
I
A
mean,
million. Let's do a million this time.
another thing I thought of was, what's the Roman numerals for 100? Because you could do like C90 XT. So, but then I looked at the Roman numerals after 100 are, and like 1000 are like nuts. Like, what are we gonna do? Like 5 V's in the name, so
Oh.
you can.
Yeah, it's just a string, a 20-letter string long
Like the
for
Roman
to get the
numeral for like
numbers.
100 or 1,000 saves a lot of space, and they throw that right out the window if you go past it. Yes. Anyways, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. Let us move on to the second story here. Nvidia RTX 50 Super Series fully leaked. Okay, now that we have warmed up from the red side, let's talk about the green side of the fence with RTX 50 Super GPUs. Now, we all know how the Blackwell launch went, and we also know what NVIDIA does when they launch a poorly received lineup with not enough VRAM for each tier. They do a super refresh. We have, of course, known what the Super 50 series would look like for quite some time since this channel first leaked details about that in spring. And that's supposedly been confirmed by other leaks out there with other specs added on. But at least in this past week, we've been able to put the full picture together without not just some of the specs, but basically every little piece of information you'd want to know about these products. So let's get into it. First, and frankly, most importantly about the 50 Super series is that NVIDIA is moving to using 24 gigabit memory chips for them that will allow for 50% higher VRAM capacity, meaning the 5080 Super and the 5070 Ti Super will get 24 gigabytes of RAM. And most importantly, the 5070 Super will get 18 gigabytes of RAM, which frankly is how much RAM it should have had at launch, in our opinion. Across the board, aside from more fitting memory pools, we can also expect around 8 to 15% better performance at the cost of higher TDPs. I say at the cost of higher TDPs since it really is only the 5070 that's actually getting more CUDA cores. The 5080 Super, same full die GB203. I think it's 10,752 CUDA cores. If I remember off the top of my head, the 5070 Ti Super will also keep 8,960 CUDA cores, and they're only increasing CUDA cores with the 5070 by 4%. So in reality, what you're getting with most of these products is as much RAM as they should have had at launch, and then they're just clocking at 10% faster at the core. In fact, only the 5080 Super gets faster memory, being at least 32 gigabit per second. Although I have heard that there is a chance it will get blazing fast, cutting edge 36 gigabit per second memory. There's a chance it will. It's not confirmed. But if it does, that memory's not out yet. That would delay it to quarter one. Whereas the 5070 Ti Super, the 5070 Super are all planning to launch, if not in October, in November. And we can be pretty confident about that because was told that they're going to end of life the 5080 and 5070 Ti as well, actually soon. So I don't know if those will dry up quickly, but that tells you they're pretty serious about it long term, these being the graphics cards. And by the way, if they would make the 5080 Super wait for like 10% faster, I guess it'd be 15% faster memory in that, like if they would actually let it get delayed to get that, I would suggest that means they're worried AMD does have a 9080 XT coming at some point. So, anyways, yep, NVIDIA screwed up. They know they screwed up. And unlike with Turing and Lovelace, AMD actually is competing effectively this time, at least if you stop quoting the widely disproven Steam hardware survey for 5 seconds and check actual retail sales and AMD and NVIDIA's financial reporting. RDNA 4 is taking do-it-yourself GPU market share. In fact, on that note, I don't have this, but if I pull up AMD's gaming sales, yeah, their gaming revenue has almost doubled year over year. Relatively speaking, that means Radeon is doing pretty well, right? So, anyways, and by the way, on that last point as well, I want to say this too. Another reason to suggest that despite, I think, completely inaccurate surveys and data being spread by a few firms people quote as gospel, the Super Series for RTX 220, that came almost a year after Turing launched, and then with pitiful competition from RDNA 3, NVIDIA waited 15 months before they launched the Lovelace lineup. This is launching in under a year after the original lineup. NVIDIA would not do this unless they saw something in the data that worried them about Radeon taking market share. Oh, and final note, yeah, look, stating the obvious, do not buy a 5070 or 5080 right now. Like you have 1-2 months to wait before you'll be able to get substantially better products at similar price points. Don't be stuck with a 12 gigabyte GPU. All right.
I mean, yeah, I feel like what Super is always in response to something, and it's always a correction of what they should have had initially. I guess right when it came out.
Ampere did not get a Super Series, and that's because Ampere did fantastic. So Again, they only
Well,
do this if they think they have to.
Ampere didn't have the Super Series. They just had the oops, all, what was it, 101 dies?
All 102 die.
102 dies, right?
Yes. The 3080, the 3080 12 gigabytes of the 3080 Ti, and the 3090 and the 3090 Ti. What is that? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. That's like 5 yields from one die.
Of course, that wasn't really
Samsung's yields. That's why, though.
Yeah, that was less a response to them screwing up their launch and more, what if we surgically target all of our binnings because of these terrible yields from Samsung? But I mean, I don't know. I feel like this is the increasingly common habit from Nvidia is not giving the card enough RAM, and then a year or and then later, coming out and giving us the card we should have had a while back. Although I guess maybe they can hide behind the fact that these intermediate modules weren't immediately available when Blackwell came out. So whatever. But yeah, I mean, the fact that this has been expedited comparatively to when they've released it in the past suggests they're either scared or AMD has something up their sleeve with like you said, like the 9070 XTT or XTX or whatever the hell they'd end up calling it. Because
or some sort of refresh, even a 9075 that's 10% faster or something. I don't know.
Because there's less of a reason I feel like for a 5080 Super this generation without that than there was for like a 4080 Super.
Yeah. And again, it's a very aggressive one. 24 gigabytes of RAM, possibly cutting edge RAM speeds, which by the way would, as we covered with the 9070 GRE, this is the opposite. That one is relaxing memory speeds a little so they can have as much supply and as cheap supply as they want for that card. NVIDIA, if they were to go to 36 or frankly, honestly, even 32 gigabit per second, that massively limits which memory suppliers and yields you can pull from to make that card. You only do that if you think you need to, especially when you're dominant in the market.
I really hope that helps their performance substantially, because that's a big limitation for if the card isn't that bandwidth starved. But because that's
we found it benefits a lot from overclocking.
True.
Reviews. So yeah, and again, the 5080 Super, this is what it should have always been. It should have always matched the 4090 or narrowly beaten it for $1,000 with the same amount of RAM. To offer something that basically sold for 4090 prices, honestly, with less RAM and less performance after the 4090 was out, was just insulting.
Yeah.
This piece of content is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. CDkeyoffer.com is really the best place to go to get reasonable pricing on Microsoft software, whether that's Windows 11 operating systems or Office products like the ones that I installed on this new Strix Halo laptop that I was testing while I made this ad. You see, I actually use CDkeyoffer.com. I've used them many times. My family members use them. My friends use them when they're building new PCs. And that's because they've been a reliable sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead for years now. And so if you're looking to get, say, a new laptop, or you just finally want to get a legitimate key of one of the latest Office products on your desktop during back to school, use CDkeyoffer.com's offer codes Broken Silicon to save 25% on all Microsoft products. And then actually you can also use offer code DieShrink to save 3% on everything else on their website, like games as well. Once again, I want to thank CDkeyoffer.com for sponsoring this content, like all the other content that they've sponsored, and for making it easy for me to get a good price on Office on my new laptop. All right, let me play this voicemail here from Fred Borger.
Hello, Tom and Dan. With the recent 50 Super leaks from Moore's Law is Dead, I can't help but feel apathetic. The 5070 is the biggest loser with only 12 gigabytes of RAM. It's perfect for the guy that's only going to play at 1080p. The 5070 Super is going to be roughly the same performance as a 9070 and at roughly the same price, but you get 2 more gigs of VRAM. The 5080 Super is just a 4090 more or less, except I guess now you're getting it for roughly half the price as the second hand. And the 5070 Ti Super is the most interesting to me with 24 gigabytes of VRAM. It's slightly better than a 4080 and at 750, 775, whatever. It just kind of feels like what the 50 series should have been, but a year later, and it feels more like an attempt at appeasement than a properly aggressive move from Nvidia, even more so than the 40 Super series did.
Yeah, I think the 40 Super series will go down as the worst one. I mean, it was pathetic in my opinion. And at first I thought it looked interesting, and their internal numbers, they thought it'd be 10% faster, but in in like final reviews it's like 2% fast. Like the 4080 Super and Raster still losing to the 7900 XTX in a lot of reviews. You know, this is better than that, I would say.
I mean, the 40 Super series really was just like the too little too late launch. Like, truly, this is what it should have been. This is at least somewhat of an improvement over what we had right now. Like, if everything is a bit faster and it actually has a pretty decent increase in bandwidth, and at least for the 5080 Super, and a pretty big increase in RAM. I don't know. I think it could end up being the best Super series we've seen so far.
Yeah. Yeah, like the 2080 Super didn't increase the amount of memory it had, and it only had 8 gigabytes, so kind of it could have used some more. I would say, I'm not apathetic about it. I think this will shake up the market a little bit. What I will say is, no, this isn't, Q, the usual all caps comments we see, AM dead, AM done for, AM whatever. Like, even if they keep the pricing the exact same, like let's say they launch a 5070 Super for $550 with 18 gigabytes and drop the price of the 5070 to $500 or I would hope actually less than that, to match the 9070 GRE. Yeah, I don't that's not going to make me instantly recommend Nvidia, because I would assume then AMD's prices would finally get closer to MSRP. And really think about what that means. Like, let's say they price drop the 5070 to $450. Well, it still has 12 gigabytes of RAM, and it would be competing with a GRE that is still 5% faster, probably, with actually enough RAM. All right, so already not going to recommend the 5070. Then you go up to the 5070 Super 18 gigabyte. All right, at $550 against a 16 gigabyte 9070 that it will probably trade blows with, I guess, yes, I would recommend the 5070. But again, I wouldn't recommend either of those over the GRE that's $100 less, and like, who knows, maybe they drop the price on the 9070 to 500, maybe it is like a soft cancellation, like you said. And if the 9070 XT goes to $600, no, I mean, look, it's like 20% faster than this still, so I'm still going to recommend the thing that's 20% faster for 10% more money, especially when we'll get to this in the wrap up. There are just tons of driver issues with NVIDIA, overhead issues, problem after problem. I don't really think NVIDIA commands a price premium in my eyes anymore. I mean, this was a discussion point with Hardware Unboxed last week. Steve said he doesn't use NVIDIA in his main system because it crashes too much and has issues. And Tim verified this. I've seen other YouTubers say the same thing, and I just think there's something going on here, like where we need to say the quiet part out loud. Guys, NVIDIA really is hard to recommend. It's not anecdotal. A lot of people are having problems with it, like really.
Yeah, and also I do just think like putting out a new Super that like is really at price performance parity with AMD's offerings. I don't know if that's a reason to be apathetic. I think
it will affect the market, but
yeah,
I
think it could drive prices down, having two competitors that directly competing with each other on the market. Like, I don't think that would. I don't see how it could lead to a negative, really.
Yeah, and I think all AMD would have to do to respond is, again, the GRE already kind of answers the half of the issue, and then the other half is you just drop the 9070 to 500, and maybe the 9070 XT kind of can just still be 600, if I'm being honest, until you prepare a 9075 XT, which could literally just be, now it runs 10% faster. Like, add 10%, same price, like RX 480 to 580. I think that's, and I do think they are going to do that at CES most likely, and then hopefully a 9080 XT above that just matches the 5080 Super. I think that's probably what we're going to see. But again, I know just because it's NVIDIA should have done this from the beginning, just because AMD has an easy way to respond effectively, they're still responding. That means prices are getting better.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Techno writes in and says, do we think NVIDIA's lackluster performance increase with the 4090 to the 5090, where what did they add? Like almost 50% more cores and double the bandwidth, basically. And they got 30% more performance. Yes, you could say that's lackluster. But he says, is that due to driver overhead? Do we think as drivers mature and as CPUs become more powerful, we'll see a 5090 ending up around 60 to 70% faster? So that's funny. I've never thought about this, but after I read this, I went, yeah, maybe. Because I covered this in a cut down yield from the conversation with Steve that came out on Sunday. Again, I highly recommend people watch that if you haven't yet. And of course, check out the full interview with Steve as well. But this is a very big deal. In my research for just preparing this cut down yield, which is really just like a enhanced version of what me and Gerard thought was an interesting part of the podcast that a lot of people might have missed. In my preparation for that, I was like looking at examples, like what can we put on screen, to make our point that NVIDIA really has the overhead issue is huge. And I was surprised how many I could find. It's because I watch reviews.
Yeah, you sent me a couple.
Like in Rainbow Six Siege, which is an example Steve brought up, it basically shows you need a 9800 X3D for the 5080 in that game to beat the 9070. And I saw a lot of, as usual, idiotic comments, fanboys freaking out in the cut down yields today on YouTube. But what I found hilarious is how many of the comments, unsurprisingly, I guess, probably didn't watch the video because they said, who cares about who's gaming with a 5090 and 1080p? And I'm like, did you watch the video? The example I give shows
they were 1440p, right? Wasn't
one of the examples with
4K?
Hogwarts was in 1440p.
Okay, 1440p.
And it showed that because of CPU overhead, most likely, and it was in 1440p though with ray tracing on in Hogwarts Legacy. And
there are definitely people on 5090s in 1440p.
And this was a 4090 too,
Sure.
Yeah. And, AMD goes from losing by like 30% in 4K to winning by 10% in 1440p, even when ray tracing is on, which NVIDIA has a huge advantage over a 7900 XTX. This example wasn't even RDNA 4 where it can do ray tracing well now. Oh, relatively well. I'd still say we need more. Now, Rainbow Six Siege was in 1080p, but people play Rainbow Six Siege in 1080p competitively. And you need a 9800 X3D for your 5080 to be the same performance as a 9070 non-XT. I think that's, you haters and you fanboys poo-pooing this as not being a big deal. Guys, I said 9800 X3D. I didn't say you need Zen 4. That's crazy to me. A lot of people are gaming in 1080p with like many different NVIDIA graphics cards with just like a Zen 4 6-core. And whatever the AMD counterpart was probably a better choice.
Yeah, I mean, if the issue started at like, I don't know, Zen 3, like 6 cores, okay, whatever, then you could argue you're looking for a complaint. But no, it's 8 cores, and pretty modern 8 cores. If you really need the 9800 X3D to get the full performance versus a substantially cheaper card, no, that points to a pretty damn big issue with overhead.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I think this is something that I'm not going to shut up about this, guys. This is, again, all those comments saying who cares about 1080p. Guys, I have a 4090 in my system. I have a 4090. It was an issue in 4K in Battlefield 6. What do you guys think is going to happen when GTA 6 comes out with cutting edge physics and hundreds of NPCs on screen? What do you think's going to happen to your graphics card here? What could be happening right now and you don't even realize your card's performing like a much cheaper AMD card? This is a big deal.
Yeah. So to go more directly to his question too, just as CPUs become more powerful, it become less of an issue. It's well, I don't know, if games become more CPU demanding, maybe the issue will just persist in more or less the same way with more powerful CPUs. It seems like an easy possibility to me.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I think this is a really big deal. Yeah. Let us move on, I suppose, to the next big deal out of NVIDIA here with story number 3. NVIDIA reducing 5060 and 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte supply. Quoting from Tech Power Up, according to a report emanating from NVIDIA board channels, Nvidia is reducing the supply of GeForce RTX 5060 and 5060 Ti GPUs with 8 gigabytes of memory to its board partners, most likely to maintain the price and prevent oversupply. The report says that Nvidia board partners have plenty of these GPUs in inventory, so the supply will be cut by 15% for the 5060 Ti and 30% for the 5060. Both of these graphics cards are based on a variant of GB206, and such a move does not come as a big surprise considering that Nvidia did not focus on 8 gigabyte frames. Well, I mean, they weren't allowed to because they didn't perform well. But this report does not specify if these cuts only apply to desktop or if laptop could be affected. I would assume it's just desktop. But yeah, so there you go. After we have discussed how Nvidia is looking to fix their lineup at the top of the range, let's now talk about how they seem to be trying to fix their lineup at the low end. You can always rely on AIBs to leak any and all information they are given the second they get it. And this time, they've let slip that NVIDIA gave them notice of a significant cut to 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte and 5060 non-Ti supply. NVIDIA's reasoning, though, is not that 8 gigabyte cards in 2025 are a poisonous product. They're just worried about supplying too many of them. Of course, that's a relative term, though. If they're worried about oversupplying them, that would suggest a lot of people are not buying them. Yes. And maybe the greater community has woken up that 8 gigabyte cards are e-waste in 2025. If there's no one to buy them, why make them after all? But anyways, let's hope that for the RTX 60 series, NVIDIA cuts the supply of 8 gigabyte trash, not by 15 or 30%, but by 100%. All right. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know much there's to say, but I thought this was notable too, because this kind of adds on to my super leak where I said they're end of lifing the 5080 and 5070 Ti, but then I was kind of sad they didn't end of life the 8 gigabyte 5060 Ti. They're half end of lifing it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is somewhat vindicates us and all the other people that have been banging the drum that 8 gigabytes is getting a little long in the tooth for a while now. Like we've been talking about it for what, 4 years now almost, when it started becoming an issue. I guess 2020 to 2025, the broader community has finally realized it, and maybe Nvidia will stop making them eventually too. Crossing my fingers.
Yeah, well, again, what I would really pray for, what I wish they would have done, is ended the 5070 as well. At least, maybe they will soft end it and do it yourself, and then they launch a 5060 12 gigabyte that's still just $299.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, unless they start releasing 8 gigabyte cards for like, I don't know, $200 again, like a 5050 8 gigabyte for $200. Don't think that's happening. Might be okay.
Yeah, I think, what did they launched a 5050. It's $250. I still think 200. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just not. It's not enough. It really isn't enough. Again, this isn't a situation where it's like, oh, so what? I can't game in 4K with my $250 card. Dude, the latest AAA games, some of them are struggling with 8 gigabyte cards in medium 1080p. And these cards are as fast as a 3070 or faster. These things could be doing way better. Like, I think the 4060, if it had 12 or 16 gigabytes for $299, I would have never recommended any of AMD's 7600 cards. Mm-hmm. Like, it really wasn't a weak card. It didn't have enough RAM at all.
Well, maybe we can see that with like 2 more SMs disabled, and they call it like a 4550 Ti or something.
Nope, you already answered it. They could launch a 5050 Ti 12 gigabyte if they want to.
Sure. Oh, sure.
But I actually had a thought about this when I was preparing the notes that I just wanted to say. I think reviewers like Hardware Unboxed, who loves to, or I guess not loves to, feels obligated to rail against 8 gigabyte graphics cards at this point consistently. I do the same thing. I think we need to stop. We need to change how we are talking about these cards. And so from now on, I'm not going to just say they don't have enough VRAM. I'm going to say they have poor performance. And then if someone asks me why they have poor performance, what makes me say that, I will say, well, it doesn't have enough RAM. Because I don't know how else we can break through to the remaining gamers that are still defending this. Like, I saw someone in the Moore's Law Discord saying, well, it's okay. NVIDIA gives laptops 6 gigabyte graphics cards still and 8 gigabyte. And I'm like, no, it isn't. You're struggling in 1080p. And I don't know what else to do, but besides do this. 8 GB graphics cards don't struggle with having enough VRAM. They have poor performance. That is what it is. Because they cannot run above PS4 Pro textures, because they have stuttering problems. People should not recommend 8 GB graphics cards in any form in this year because they have bad performance. And it is linked to the VRAM, but it is not the secondary thing we should be discussing separately.
Yeah, it does become a weird issue where sometimes where VRAM is almost discussed as if it's not actually like not actually a spec in graphics cards a lot of the time, or it's like, well, sure, there's less RAM, and I guess that's a negative. But no, I mean, it
shouldn't be a negative.
It is
the
material
line,
impacting performance. Yeah.
And I'm going to say the same thing about CPU overhead too, by the way. Like, if you say, what's the best graphics card for like ray tracing 4K 120, I'll say, well, the 5090 is the best at it if you have the money. But if someone asks me, well, I want a game at 1440p 240, I'm going to say, don't buy the 5090 because it has bad performance in 1440p 240, because in a lot of games it cannot hit 240 consistently because of the CPU overhead issue. And again, it shouldn't be a negative. It is giving you a lower frame rate than the competition. That is less performance. So I think that's how we need to start talking about this stuff, to like move this past this just being something that comes up sometimes, because it is, I believe, a very big issue. Both of these things. All right. Now, speaking of improving performance, not poor performance. Speaking of poor performance until next year, I don't know how I want to do this transition, but let us move on to story number 4 with FSR 4 coming to RDNA 3. I put out an update during the live stream, and yeah, I mean, look, I think I'll just skip the write-up too and just say exactly what I said. I mean, I have heard that RDNA 3 will for sure get FSR 4. This isn't like it's falling apart. There's not developmental issues. You know, AMD's talked about it. I leaked that this would happen a long time ago. You know, where is it? I was told directly last week that it was just taking a lot of work. That basically they were having to like rewrite FSR 4 from the ground up, like to make it work with different hardware in RDNA 3 and RDNA 3.5 that just literally does not have the same instruction set or whatever math capabilities of RDNA 4. So they basically just have to redo how they do some of the effects in FSR 4. And that's just taking a lot of time. However, I've heard that they moved a lot more people over to the, I guess you could call it the FSR 4 on RDNA 3 driver team, a development team. And they're moving them there from people who are helping finish up PSSR 2 development, porting FSR 4 to PS5 Pro, which isn't exactly the same, by the way, because PS5 Pro does not have RDNA 4 exactly. Like it would have to do FSR 4 the same way RDNA 3 would, but it does have significantly more AI performance than RDNA 3. Like, again, I think it has more tops in the PS5 Pro than what the 7900 XTX has, despite the 7900 XTX, you know, having, 50% more compute units. So, you know, get whatever they can do to get it to work on the PS5 Pro. They might be able to use like one math operation to do it. But then when they move to RDNA 3, they might have to split it up into some different ways of doing different things. And so that's taken more work than it has porting it to PS5 Pro. But they're almost done with the PS5 Pro thing. And so they're moving more people there. And so, yeah, it's coming. FSR 4 will come to RDNA 3, but it's probably going to be at the very end of this year or early next year. And I also did say, too, in that live stream, and I asked about this directly to a source, it's not coming to RDNA 2, at least not anywhere remotely soon. No one's working on it. So I guess even if a janky version of it could be hacked to run on RDNA 2 to some degree, it doesn't sound like that's going to be official.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I think it's more essential to their business to have it actually on RDNA 3 because so many of their products are RDNA 3.
I mean, the main reason to do it would be so that the Steam Deck, Xbox, and PlayStation 5 games can use it. But honestly,
or if you're going to bring,
okay.
Yeah, or I mean, put it another way, like if you're doing the legwork to bring some versions of it to, or some modified version of it to PS5, why wouldn't it eventually be brought to the other ones too? But yeah. I mean, not too many thoughts other than I'm excited to try it out once it's finally on RDNA 3 because then I get to do some testing with my 7900 XTX.
Yeah, and for me with Strix Halo, I mean, I don't want to have the same, Groundhog's Day conversation we've had a dozen times about why they really need to bring FSR 4 to RDNA 3 in some form. But I will say again, just the most important one for me is actually the APUs. It has nothing to do with the PS5 Pro. PS5 Pro already looks fine. They have their own version with PSSR works well enough, honestly. But the major issue is they will be selling Hawk Point rebrands, Strix Point rebrands, Gorgon Point, and Strix Halo for years and years, and those really should have a version of FSR that's competitive with DLSS. That would be just a huge shot in the arm, honestly, to the performance of those APUs. I think that, again, that could fundamentally change the game even more on if you should bother with getting dedicated graphics cards anymore. If all of them had a good version of FSR and you could just reasonably play in, honestly, 1080p or with FSR, maybe 1440p now in Strix Point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll see. I do think based on how fast they're accelerating with APUs, a lot of people could just say DGPUs really aren't a thing I need anymore.
But anyways, speaking about a product that uses an APU with FSR 4, let us move on to story number 5. This piece of content is brought to you by JLC PCB. JLC PCB supports a wide range of PCB materials, including traditional FR4, aluminum, and copper core boards. But beyond these, JLC also specializes in flexible PCBs, offering enhanced versatility for modern electronics. But that's not all. In addition to classic yellow, black, and white PCB substrates, they now provide transparent PCBs that gives a sleek, futuristic design for electronics that want to ditch bulky enclosures and embrace a more transparent circuit board as their foundation. Truly, whether it is EDA software, PCB layout, manufacturing or assembly, or 3D printing, CNC machining, and mechatronic parts, JLC PCB accelerates global hardware innovation. If you want to get any of these products and support Moore's Law is Dead, check out the link in the description to get easy, affordable, and reliable PCB manufacturing. And you can even get a $10 coupon for a Flex PCB right now. So support Moore's Law is Dead by supporting JLC PCB today. PlayStation 6 handheld fully leaked. Our second to last main story this week is yet again one of this channel's leaks. This one is on the PS6 handheld and its SoC, Canis. We of course revealed Canis already, but now we have had enough information to detail it properly with a full breakdown of its specs and even its die itself. Now, here is the summarization. It is a 135 millimeter squared TSMC 3 nanometer die with 4 Zen 6 C cores for games and 2 Zen 6 low power cores for the OS. Although there was a note on one document that having 2 low power cores for handling all background operations allows them to free up 20% more performance for the CPU portion compared to if they had a bigger like 5 core or 6 core one that had to use that. So I do think that's worth pointing out when people compare this to the PS5 CPU. Now, obviously, a Zen 6 core is going to be like double the performance of a Zen 2 core. I mean, it will be and so it could. And remember, Zen 6C cores will have the same amount of IPC, and even Zen 6C will probably hit 4.5 to 5 gigahertz. I would imagine 4 to 5 gigahertz, let's say. And keep in mind that is even 4 gigahertz is 30% higher clocks than what the PS5 has, right? With Zen 2, because it just clocks that much higher, even in its C form. But also note that like the PS5, it had 8 cores. One of them was disabled, and I believe one of them was reserved for the operating system, or half of it was, or something like that. So if you think about that, well, it was almost only a 6 core anyways in some ways. This will have 6 cores. It's just a more eloquent way of having some of the cores handle background tasks. So this will be actually quite a bit more CPU performance than the PS5. I want to be clear about that to everybody. But it is very area optimized, having only 4 megabytes of L3 cache, which isn't that crazy, by the way. The 11 core that I leaked in the Xbox has only, I believe, 12 megabytes of L3. So they're really saving space with the amount of cache on these next-gen consoles. By the way, like I told you they all would. No, they're not using X3D. But anyways, now moving on from the CPU to the GPU specs, it'll have a 16 compute unit RDNA 5 integrated GPU, one that right now Sony expects to run at around 1.2 gigahertz in handheld mode and 1.65 gigahertz in docked mode. Yep, that's right. It is dockable just like the Switch and Switch 2. And when you see those clocks, I would suggest this thing will use a very little amount of energy. This isn't aiming for like 3 gigahertz clocks like the microwave sized PC handhelds being sold right now. I think this could, if it wants to, be as big or smaller than the Switch. Additionally, manufacturing of the chip should start mid 2027. So yes, we expect the PS6 handheld to launch in fall of 2027. By estimating the BOM cost as well, now that I have the full die and specs information, I think they could price this thing between $399 and $499. And that is with a decent margin as well. That's not Sony. I think people misconstrue this. That's with good PSVR 2 level margins. I think they could sell this for $399 to $499 based on what I know now, though. Now, tariffs could change this. Everybody, please. I don't know if the way I put it is I think this could be around the price of a PS5. And I think then the PS6 desktop, if you will, Orion, could be cheaper than the PS5 Pro. But I keep hedging that way. PS5 Pro around the price of a PS5 because I don't know what those are going to cost by then, due to tariffs and all that crap. So anyways, though, additionally, a potential home console variant of this, because it does not need a battery, a screen, and a lot of the other stuff that makes it more expensive, you could make a home console version that's $299 to $399. Further suggesting, in my opinion, that Sony is also designing this APU to have an offering that forces PS4 gamers to upgrade with a very, very, very cheap offering. Now, the one big spec we are not certain on yet, though, is memory. We, of course, cannot know how much memory Sony will decide to give the handheld. What we can tell you is that as a 192-bit LPDDR5X memory bus, stated to have 8,533 megatransfer memory. That is very fast memory, and that is a 50% wider bus than you see with most APUs, including the one that is used in the Xbox Ally X. But I will say that I expect 24 to 36 gigabytes. At first, I thought it would be 24 gigabytes, but I spoke with a lot of developers, and they basically all told me that if Sony is really going to use AI and ray tracing, which they do plan to, that they're going to actually need a ton more memory. So there you go. It should probably have 36 gigabytes and at least 24. And then, okay, specs are fun to discuss if you're a dork like me, but for what performance can you dorks and non-dorks actually expect once we cut through the numbers? I would suggest that despite it only having 16 compute units like the APU and the Xbox Ally X, that it will be RDNA 5 compute units. So it will actually perform quite a bit better than people might think it will by looking at the specs of, because again, 16 compute units, for 6 Zen cores, but they're low power and C cores. It doesn't sound that crazy, but you have to keep in mind that at the same clocks, RDNA 5 will be 40 to 50% faster than RDNA 3.5, which is in the Ally X. And compared to RDNA 2 in the PS5, each of these compute units at the same clocks as the PS5 would be, 60% faster. And that's in raster. And ray tracing, I think it's 3 to 4 times the ray tracing performance of RDNA 3.5 at same clocks. So even when you factor in the fact that the Ally X will be clocked faster with its GPU than what this will be at only 1.2 to 1.65 gigahertz, I still think that much higher IPC in the fact that it will have 60% more bandwidth too than the Ally X, and still, even at lower clocks, double the ray tracing performance could make this thing perform like 50% to twice as good as the Ally X if optimized to the metal, which it will be able to because it doesn't have to run Windows. It runs an optimized operating system. So this will, whatever the Ally X does is the way I would put it. Like, okay, like here's an example. I think I saw that the new Doom game will run 1080p 70 with like low or medium ray tracing or something on the Ally X. Well, if that game can do 1080p 70 on the Ally X, I believe it will do 1080p 120 with ray tracing cranked up to ultra on this handheld. And so it's going to be pretty impressive for the time. But this isn't hopium. This is coming out in 2027. You would hope the tech in the future is better than the tech of the present. Now,
well, that is a surprise to a lot of people.
It continues to be a surprise to everybody.
About 2 years out hardware, people are like, it's going to be stronger than what we have now. And the answer is almost always yes.
Almost, unless you're Intel.
There's a few instances where it doesn't happen, but yeah, it's usually the case.
Now that's comparing it to the Ally X, comparing Canis to the PS5. Well, look, it should have 50 to 75% more raster performance than the PS5 in docked mode. And this is based on actual documents that I have where they are benchmarking, simulating the performance directly against the PS5. So this isn't like me estimating on this one like I have to at the Ally X. They literally benchmark this against the PS5 in simulations. And it should have about 55 to 75% the raster of the PS5. But then it will have 30% more to 130% more ray tracing performance, bringing it closer to the PS5 Pro in ray tracing than the base PS5. What does that mean? Once you factor in FSR 4 with that raster performance, I think this thing will be like the same performance in image quality as the PS5, but with ray tracing turned up and with enough RAM to do things with AI and also ray tracing in games that the PS5 is not capable of, meaning that I could even see PS5 to PS6 Canis kind of feeling like a bigger leap than PS4 Pro to like PS5 did. So I think that's exciting. That's something I'm probably going to do a whole video on to explain to people soon, but just kind of spelling it out here too.
Yeah, I mean, even if there's not a big uplift in raster performance, like, I don't know, just being able to do that degree of ray tracing will completely change, the way games look. And if the promise of integrating AI features into games does actually pan out, I mean, it will just allow you to do new like mission types and whatnot in games. Like, I think we talked about that. Like Gorilla with Horizon could do some cool stuff with like AI generated mission types or just having AI generated interactions that you really just couldn't do this generation.
Yeah, I don't remember who brought that up. If it was a developer I was talking to, I think it may have been like Brian Heemskirk. I'm not sure, but like I think it was him, and he pointed out like Horizon, which oftentimes Guerrilla Games is the one that makes some launch title to show off a console, whether it's Killzone Shadowfall or Horizon Forbidden West, which I don't think it wasn't a launch game, but it was kind of a launch, this is coming out game. That's a perfect game. Horizon 3 is a perfect game to have an AI model that lets you just directly talk to the NPCs in the game. And by the way, they would have a game due in 27 if they have a 5-year cadence, I believe. So maybe it is. We are predicting that to a degree. It could really be a thing. And I think that's going to be much more noticeable than I think that's how I'll start putting it. I think PS5 to PS6S could still feel in many ways like a bigger uplift than PS4 Pro to PS5 did. It's not going to be like PS4 to PS5 probably, and certainly not graphics, but I don't know. I mean, over double the ray tracing performance, the image might be like the same as what you had on the PS5. It can just now run at 120 better because the CPU is so much stronger. And maybe in docked mode or something, or at least the frame rate's more stable. And then ray tracing, which is probably more notable than if they went to 8K. And then all of your AI dialogues they exist in the first place, but they're also instant. I think that would feel more like a generational uplift. And I think that's something I'm going to have to spend a lot of time trying to get across to people. Is like the comparison I would make is they're like, what? The GPU in PS6 Orion is only like, I don't know, 2-3 times more raster than the PS5. And it's like, yeah, guys, but the ray tracing is 10 times more, maybe 11 times more from what I'm hearing recently, actually. And, the PS3 to PS4, the CPU wasn't any stronger. Actually, it was weaker.
Easier to program for, at least, though.
Exactly. And so, like I think that's the comparison really to make to people. It's like PS3 to PS4, GPU way stronger, tons more RAM. And that is what mattered that generation. The CPU didn't even get an upgrade. And I don't know how you'd put it for like PS4 to like PS5, but it was really the SSD and its CPU. See, then they did go for the CPU. And this time around, they don't think you need the GPU's raster to be that much better. They just think you need like an 11x of ray tracing and new AI capabilities and a more stable frame rate.
Yeah.
And this is what Mark Cerny does every time. He decides what will make something feel next gen, and it's not always the same thing.
Yeah, and I do think, at least from a hardware design perspective, Sony's knocked it out of the park 2 generations in a row. So,
Yeah. So might they bungle it again? Bungle it? I don't know,
but,
but I can see what they're thinking here.
yeah, so in other words, Tom, let them cook, or let Mark Cerny cook.
Let Cerny cook. Jensen Wang writes in and says, with your Canis leak, you talked about old school pricing, which seems to generally be, from what I could tell, you were saying they would have less than a $50 markup and maybe even sell the console at a slight loss. But let's remember that if you go very old school with the PS3, Sony subsidized each console like $250 to $300. So if they really wanted to be old school, shouldn't PS6 Canis be $100? I mean,
Give it to us
if the
for
company
free.
if the company wants to go out of business with like they almost did with the PS3, that's what they should do.
Yeah.
But it is funny to think about that.
Make the Canis home device a subscription model, Tom,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to subscribe to, and they give it to you for free.
Yeah, because they tried. Remember, they actually tried that with the Xbox One S. I think they tried to do that.
Oh yeah,
and that didn't gain them really anything. They've had Game Pass has been stagnant for years, and they lost 2 generations in a row. So
they're not 100 million on Games Pass or whatever it was supposed to be by now.
But isn't that funny, by the way? Like how much people freak out over like tablets are going to replace consoles because they're selling well, and then all apps we have app slop instead of good games. That didn't happen, and then it's like pretty soon. I mean, I just remember the bedlam in some gaming circles when Google announced Stadia, and they're like, Stadia is going to make it so we don't own games anymore. No, failed. Like not all of the things that are announced succeed, and so far it seems like what gamers want is a box and to play a game on the box instead of streaming it. Yes, there's streaming, but it's not replacing PC gaming or home consoles at all. In fact, on that note, Hayabu writes in, it says, have you noticed that the marketing of the 2010s to even 2022 of stream your game everywhere versus local hardware that was being pitched by Sony, Xbox, Nvidia, Steam, and Google all seem to have been completely replaced by locally powered hardware with AI marketing now? Do the companies choose gamers preferred locally powered games because of the AI boom, or is that just coincidence? No, the streaming failed. Stadia failed. PS Now is like, I guess, doing okay. Nvidia's, I hear, is actually doing decently well, but there's never been more handhelds to choose from, despite if you had a handheld, that'd be kind of an ideal time to stream a game. And what we've learned is locally run games has won the war. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I guess that's always a possibility, is that the next thing in the dust heap of PC hardware gimmicks is AI. We'll see. I don't think it's a complete
be around
gimmick,
to some degree,
but
it's not going to be. But like the degree to which they thought we would use it will be probably a gimmick for a decade.
Yeah.
Techno writes in and says, do you expect a Canis refresh with LPDDR6? No. I'm not going to read the rest of it. No, they're using LPDDR5X for a good reason. Also, remember AT4, and I think probably the desktop version of AT3. Like, this is the successor, everybody, to like a 9050 XT, 9060 XT coming out with RDNA 5. Those will be using LPDDR5X. So LPDDR5X is going to be around for a long time. I don't think Sony's going to be like, oh, they don't make it anymore. A very long time. And Panther Lake's still going to use it. Yeah, everything. It's going to be around for a while. Planet 9 writes in and says, how do you think Sony is speccing the NPU for the PS6 and the PS6 handheld? If you use the NPU for FSR, it would seem reasonable to give the larger die a larger NPU. But if you use the NPU for running an in-game AI inference model, create a different experience if there was one. Yeah, I would assume that any NPU in the PS6 handheld will be the same.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Between them. And what that would mean is that would constrain them to not going completely crazy. But what I will say is, and I'm saving some of this for a leak I want to put together as part of a greater video. I do know at least one of the NPUs out of the next gen consoles, and it puts the current laptop ones to shame. It's like over twice as powerful, at least. So, like, I don't know how big that will be or what that will require, but
6,000 tops, Tom.
But that would, that might also explain like why Microsoft wants mostly C cores and Magnus, why Sony is going like all C core. It's like with a handheld, just 4 megabytes of cache. They're saving a lot of space on the CPU, again, because they don't think it needs to be that crazy powerful, probably to leave room in this small die for a decent NPU. And if I think about the die size, right, actually just thinking about this out loud for Canis, I mean, what? 135 millimeters squared. So we're looking at something, that's kind of similar to, what do I want it, like Kraken in die size, maybe a little smaller than Kraken, and Kraken has a fully fledged NPU. Okay, so they have 16 CUs instead of 8 in Kraken. Okay, they also have half as many cores, and a tiny amount of cache for those cores that probably frees up enough room for a decent NPU still with
True.
16 compute units, so that's what I would suggest. All right, let us now move on to the final story of the week, with this one being a new leak, actually, that I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a video on, but I thought, no, it doesn't deserve its own 20-minute leak because, frankly, it's a little depressing, but it does deserve to be in this episode because everyone's talking about Panther Lake. So I'm calling this the Intel Pathetic Lake Testimonials leak, and Gerard will put this on screen now. I got two sources here, one that gave me a huge information dump that was the basis of this leak, and then I went to an OEM source of mine to follow up on if this is true. So the first source, again, an Intel retail partner, told me that they have been told by OEMs that they have already nicknamed Panther Lake as Pathetic Lake, meaning in meetings, if this retail partner asks like an OEM, what's going on with Panther Lake, they will say, you mean Pathetic Lake. Now, apparently this is because they are having tons of issues with the NPUs currently in the current systems. Intel goes on stage and announces like all of our AI partners. Apparently the software to use the NPU is garbage. Like they can't get half of this stuff to work stably, and they can't get the NPU to output the performance they were promised it would give. Now that's just with the current ones, but they're worried about the same thing about Panther Lake. On top of that, Celestial's drivers are in which is the integrated graphics of Panther Lake, are in a worse state now than Lunar Lake's Battle Mage drivers were aligned like a few months before it launched. Remember, Intel is claiming this launches December. So we're a few months away from launch. A few months before Lunar Lake came out, Battle Mage was working way better than Celestial is right now, apparently. And then on top of that, basically every performance target has apparently been missed from what they briefed their partners on a year ago to expect out of Panther Lake. And this person emphasized everything. Efficiency is lower than expected. It can't support memory speeds as fast as they wanted it to for the LPDDR5X. So who knows? It might be limited to like 8,000 or something. Or don't quote me on that, but like I would doubt that it's going to be able to get the fastest like 11 gigabit per second memory. CPU performance is coming in subpar. And in the silicon quality, apparently in early yields is not very good. So truly the only saving grace, according to the source, is that the integrated GPU, when it isn't crashing, is quite an uplift over Lunar Lake, which I guess if you think about it, that would bring you to like full 3050 performance, probably actually mobile, maybe even 3060 Max-Q performance. Again, when it's working, it's almost never working. They doubt that it will be ready for launch, in fact, with stable drivers. In fact, one OEM told this source that they aren't even confident if Panther Lake can fully replace Lunar Lake in their lineup. Now, this is when I went, ooh, that's something specific. I went to an OEM source of mine, one that I've actually known for years now, and I said, is this true? Are you, like, I was told, I won't say which OEM it was, but I was told specifically some quotes from OEMs from this source. I'm like, this is you work at this OEM. Are you expecting Panther Lake to fully replace Lunar Lake? Because that's what it should do. I mean, it's basically a Lunar Lake successor. And the person said no, laughed, and then said that it could be Meteor Lake all over again. And they're furious with Intel yet again. And they think AMD will dominate CPU easily until the end of 2026 at a minimum. And they think they will keep using Lunar Lake as their main Intel flagship for a while, which is the same crap we heard about Meteor Lake when they said they keep using Raptor Lake. That's very depressing. But I want to say this too. Before we started recording, I was talking to Carrie Sugata about it. And I said, I realized like how damning that OEM quote is though. Think about it. This is, I believe, 4 big cores, 8 little cores, 4 low power cores, replacing 4 big, 4 low power from Lunar Lake.
Yeah.
Hello, people. We are going to double the cores and substantially more of cores that would be faster too. if they don't think it's good enough to fully replace Lunar Lake, I have to assume that has something to do with driver stability and efficiency. And then it hit me. Lunar Lake came out a year ago, almost to the day, Dan, right now.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 years after Lunar Lake's out, this can't replace it. What is that? Hopefully it turns out well, but that's damning. And by the way, that's the very damning thing, because it's concrete. It's not like I'm hearing there's issues.
Yeah.
An OEM said actionable things, concrete things, not it seems bad. It's this isn't as good as I wanted. It's we don't think this will fully replace Lunar Lake.
Yeah.
So I joked in the Moore's Law Discord the other day when I was, I usually let the fans know when I'm preparing a video. I said video rendering, and then they usually all start guessing at what it's about. The previous joke, by the way, by Benjamin in the Discord was finally an Xbox leak. And then I actually did start putting out Xbox leaks, and he's like, well, the joke doesn't work anymore. So now he says, finally, he's going to tell us the specs of the Steam Deck 2 and the Steam console. That is what everyone wants to know. But I mean, if I knew that, I probably would have told you a long time ago. And, but one of the people said, please let it be something about Panther Lake. And I said, you don't want it to be.
We don't talk about Panther Lake.
You want to live in the world where we all think it's going to be excellent. So again, look, the only thing I can say is I didn't leak exact performance metrics. I didn't leak, that it's done. So who knows? Maybe they will pull a rabbit out of a hat over the next 3 months, and it will launch, and it will be like Lunar Lake again, where they match in AMD's integrated graphics while offering similar or better efficiency, at least in the niche they're in. But at this stage, when I hear things like they missed performance targets, well, at a minimum, that tells you they're not going to hit what they wanted it to hit. And that also tells you with the Lunar Lake thing that they don't think it's going to be actionably better enough that they'll stop selling. Well, let's be honest, probably Raptor Lake still even and Arrow Lake in that behind it. And that they don't think this is, I don't know. It sounds like they kind of think Gorgon Point's going to beat it, which is just a refresh of Strix. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, OEMs always want a new generation every year so that they can slap onto their new models to say it's updated. So if OEMs really don't want that or don't think that this can replace it, that must mean it's bad. And I mean, let's look at it from the positive. From my perspective, I can't really be disappointed at Intel anymore. So like, I'm just this is my level set expectation where it's like, oh, don't ever get excited about Intel because this is what's going to happen with them until eventually it doesn't, hopefully. So crossing my fingers for Nova Lake, I suppose.
Yeah, it's kind of like the opposite of like, well, you can assume NVIDIA's GPUs will be faster. You can assume AMD's new Zen architecture is going to be another massive 30% uplift, at least in some metrics, and that you can get excited for that. It's a safer bet to just assume Intel's going to keep sputtering around for a while until they don't. Nova Lake is good. And again, I do not hear the same issues with Nova Lake. I will say that. I do not hear any of the same things, but we'll see what happens 3 months before launch, but again, I hear very different things with Nova Lake. So it's just sad that at a minimum, it seems like Panther Lake isn't going to actionably improve Intel's situation at all. Right. Like,
yeah,
again, I think this is worth pointing out, like Gorgon Point, if it is like Hawk Point, I know that doesn't sound exciting, but that would be enough. If it was the same as Hawk Point, like Hawk Point managed to basically the integrated graphics, because it could use the memory better, it seems, from the Fox's testing. Who should come on soon, by the way. I believe he's going to be one of our next guests. I just was talking with him. I mean, look, he found Hawk Point at 30 watts was like 20% faster than Phoenix in a lot of games. It was much more efficient. And then, it just boosted overall performance pretty much 5% across the board, but with better performance at 30 watts at 20% more performance. It's like, if that's all they do with Gorgon Point is like, it's like Strix Point, but at 30 watts and less, it is 20% faster. And then the CPU clocks 5% higher. To me, that sounds like enough to be competitive with Panther Lake, which is not good. Panther Lake should crush it. with its 4+8+4 targeted 30-watt design. It shouldn't even be close.
But
And it's on 18A. AMD's on 4 nanometer, guys. It shouldn't be close. And Intel has arguably a 2-node advantage.
yeah, but leave it to Intel to somehow miss the mark every time.
So yeah, I don't know how much more there's to say about this. You know, it's big news. I thought I should get it out. Again, there's going to be, I know there's already comments appearing. Well, they're listening. Oh, he's such an Intel hater. Guys, I was fucking right about Meteor Lake. I was right. Okay. And I was right. Well, if anything, I was wrong about Arrow Lake because it underperformed expectations so much. But I was right before the launch when I conveyed, guys, it's not winning anything. So I'm not a hater. I just tell you the news. And the news is that Intel has been falling short for many years. And I'm going to report the news if it's bad. And it's Panther Lake does not seem like it's at a minimum as good as they wanted it to be. But again, like flashbacks to Meteor Lake, where we're like, ooh, it's not as good as they wanted, but could it at least? And then by the time the launch came around, it was a regression.
Yeah.
Over rapidly. This piece of content is brought to you by the fans that support the independent journalism of Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. And it does need supporting, from personal attacks from tech elites that get mad when we tell you that they are lying to gamers and their own shareholders, to legal attacks from mega corporations that cost the team time and money. This is expensive and often very stressful work. And it's work that doesn't depend on access journalism, nor depend on NDAs or agreements that would sanitize our opinions and hold us back. No, nothing holds us back, and we are independently funded, and we use said funding to do things like pay professional renderers to show you products before they come out so that the sources that provided us the original pictures don't get in trouble. Or we also create bonus content like Die Shrinks, where you have videos and interviews coming out multiple times a month exclusively to reward our patrons with the extra content that we know they would like to see, whether it's inside scoops or more in-depth conversation and stuff that we just know wouldn't profit if we put it out publicly, but it doesn't need to profit for our fans on Patreon because it is self-funded. And so if you want any of that bonus content, or you want to support the independent journalism of Moore's Law is Dead, or honestly, if you just want to support me, Dan, Gerard, Carbon Cry, or Jesse and Maurice so that we have food on the table every day, consider supporting Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. And to those that already support us there, I'll see you on the Discord. All right, let us now move on to the wrap-up and the final questions. These are, of course, the stories that we thought needed a discussion, but did not need a full 5 to 10 minute discussion. Oh, look at that. Panther Lake has been spotted in an Acer laptop or something in some marketing. So... but I added that to the wrap up in the early version of these notes before I added the pathetic Lake leak. So, yay. Also, I think this one is interesting though. Arrow Lake got a bunch more games. A bunch more games got APO support with Arrow Lake, and I continue to hear that APO, or actually something frankly I can't say the name of because I was told it was too sensitive, but what I call APO Plus publicly is going to be a major factor in if Nova Lake can match Zen 6 in gaming. And that they might bring versions of that, what they've managed to do or are trying to do with Nova Lake. They might bring some of those optimizations to Arrow Lake Refresh. And it seems also to Arrow Lake itself. So I think this actually is surprisingly, again, guys, I'm not an Intel hater. This is something to watch where I think this could surprise us how good Arrow Lake Refresh is. Yeah, I think it's going...
If APO gets integrated into a lot of games, okay, then it's a real feature. Like...
Yeah, like if most games get...
Or even
a
substantial degree, like, I don't know if most, or if we're like, even if a substantial percentage of games, it's still something to talk about. I mean, if it's like less, like 20%, it's probably not a feature to count on that much, but it's still something.
Like, so let me see here. So if I go to like the 9950X, I just want to put this in perspective for everybody. If I go to the 9950X 3D review on Hardware Unboxed and look at their 1080p average, no, not 720p, There's a long discussion me and Steve had, but on why we think it would be stupid to benchmark 720p. But so if I look at where the 285K is right now, it's at 160 frames, and the 9950 X3D is at 219. Okay, so if Arrow Lake refresh is just 10% faster in gaming, which I'm told is what their current projection is. So let me take 160, multiply that by 1.1, 776. All right, that already puts it now. They did it. They finally beat Raptor Lake. That puts it, only like 5% behind the 7950 X3D. And it's, now we're like 10% behind the 7800 X3D. Well, if APO can add 14% more performance, and that comes to even half of the games out there, let me see where that would get us to. Let's do this. Let's even cut that in half. Let's do 7%, assuming half of the games don't have APO. You get to 188. Okay, so you're still behind the 9950 X3D, but now you're firmly ahead of the 7800 X3D. And now, you're kind of in spitting distance. And there will probably, at that point, be some games here, if I do this math again, too, where it's only like 5-10% behind the 9800 X3D and the 9950 X3D. And once you're only 10% behind the 9950 X3D, you're beating Zen 5 non-X3D in gaming while offering the same or better productivity than Zen 5 X3D. I think Arrow Lake starts to have a real argument. So yeah. I do actually, and this will surprise the people that think I'm an Intel hater, I do actually think Arrow Lake refresh is something worth watching for, because if APO, look, they're basically giving them away for free. So if Arrow Lake refresh comes in at reasonable pricing and APO boosts performance another 10% or something, or almost across the board, I do think you start to get into a situation where, like, okay, if it's really cheap, fine, actually, I can recommend that over Zen 5. Just remember that Zen 5 can upgrade to Zen 7. So that's what you're giving up if you get Arrow Lake instead. But bargain bin builds for like your niece or something, go for it. She's not going to upgrade the CPU ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. So much more optimistic on that than I am about apparently Pathetic Lake. Another thing in the wrap-up that I think is interesting is the Legion Go 2. If we thought Sony was going for near Vita portability, that is not where PC handhelds are going, as they slowly turn into fucking laptops, I guess. We'd just get a laptop at a certain point. But I don't know. Maybe it'll be cool. It is enormous, though. I think it weighs as much as my Strix Halo laptop, or pretty close.
That's good. That's good.
And it's $1,100 and has the Z2. One thing I do like about it, though, they went from 1600p 144 to 1200p 144, but it's OLED. I like that.
That's nice.
Because I can tell you, as someone who's extensively tested Strix Point, which is what is in the Z2 Extreme.
Yeah.
It's not gonna do 4K, man. And 1600p might work in a couple of older games, but it can kind of max out 1080p, and so an OLED 1200p screen,
it's kind of ideal for it. Although the one thing I dislike is it's so much more expensive, and you're getting a regression in resolution. Or it would be nice if it were to save on costs, but
the battery is also huge, 50% larger. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, the battery life I would think it will be a lot better on this than the Legion Go 1.
So let me say this too. Let me, I take back the fucking. I take back the swearing about how big it is, because at least it is able to be a tablet like the Switch. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to spend laptop pricing for this handheld, at least it might actually be usable kind of like a laptop. So it's interesting. I think this is much more interesting, actually, now that I'm thinking about this. Yeah, actually, this is actually kind of more interesting to me than the Xbox ROG Ally X, because I think either you want it to be around the size of a Switch or smaller, or you want it to be able to be used as your laptop. Otherwise, I don't really get why you would have something this big. Or you want an external battery pack so that it can be more powerful than my laptop with GPD. I don't know. I find this and the GPD one more interesting, though, than the Xboxes. They actually seem to be experimenting with interesting form factors. So we will see. So I take back the insults, Lenovo. Send me one for review, please. They won't. No one does.
Regardless, send me one for review, even if I think it's stupid. I still
Yes,
want it
I guess
for
to
free.
be fair, I wish
I still
everyone would
want
send
all
me
of them
everything
for free,
Yeah, I
so
mean, I could at least sell it or something. Also, the 9500F budget CPU just launched in China. It is 24% faster than the 7500F and at a pretty low price, but it is China exclusive for now. But this is an interesting one to watch because what does that cost right now in the US? Can you get 150? Yeah. Yeah, you bring a Zen 5 version of a 6-core to $150. That's going to be the budget CPU to beat for sure.
yeah.
Also, Sapphire is making motherboards now. And I actually heard someone, I guess I probably shouldn't say who, them admit it publicly if they want to, but someone who's in the Moore's Law Zed Discord who would know said that this isn't a short-term thing. Sapphire's in on AMD motherboards, and they're even planning to make AM6 motherboards in the distant future as well. Like they're getting the same briefings on whatever Zen 8 will use or whatever. So I think that's exciting. Another motherboard
I mean, I like
manufacturer.
Sapphire. That's interesting.
Also, isn't like ASRock and Asus breaking CPUs? Or I don't remember all of this stuff I've seen.
ASRock might be going away for recommended if you want a budget.
Might need to be replaced by Sapphire.
We'll see. Will Sapphire be budget though? I would imagine. Well, yeah, they would have budget.
They kind
options.
of do both, kind of like EVGA did. Like if you think about it, like they're like both the nicest and also the cheapest. They're just the biggest company for AMD GPUs, pretty much. Well, probably not. Asus probably sells more. I don't know. Because everyone loves Asus for some reason. But all right, MI 500. I don't really have much to say about this. This is something I explained in the Moore's Law is Dead live stream that like I used to do a lot of these like MI 250X, MI 300X. I mean, I leaked renders of the MI 300 before anyone, years before actually. And in fact, I wish I would have. I have to be careful, but I wish I would have like actually said some of the specs I knew too, because I kind of guessed how many compute units there were just by looking at the schematic I had. And not the schematic. I won't say exactly what it was, but and I guessed right.
A thing you had.
But yeah. And I think some people might go, why don't you do as many server and MI leaks anymore or whatever? And it's like, well, because I kind of have access to the kingdom now in terms of information from all of these companies. I'm going to prioritize Xbox and PlayStation and gaming super Nvidia cards over that. So I haven't paid much attention to this, but I do think it's interesting. Like it's coming. There's MI 500 in 2027. I hear good things about them catching up to Nvidia and software and support and capabilities. So worth mentioning still, though, I think. All right. Here we have, what is this here? Congress is considering forcing Nvidia to sell its leading GPUs to Americans first with the GAIN AI Act. Yes, GAIN is an acronym. They always have to have a fun acronym in the U.S. government.
Wait, no, that
GAIN.
That doesn't work.
Just GAIN. Doesn't work.
No.
But yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this or you saw this, Dan.
No. I don't know. I'm sure Nvidia's not happy about that.
No, I mean, it's something that I follow. I would recommend, by the way, if you guys want like kind of a markets and economic podcast, the Prof G Show Markets Podcast. Prof G is short for Professor Galloway. It's really good, and they've been talking about this. Like, the U.S. government better be careful here. Like, the S&P 500 really isn't a good measure of the health of the American economy. It's really a measure of like 7 companies and how well they're doing, because they make up the whole freaking market now. And if Nvidia starts going down, if Nvidia lost 10% of its value, that would hurt the S&P more than like 100 companies losing 20%. So I don't know. They better be careful with how they do this. I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole national defense thing, but I'd say if you actually want to stop China, you should do something about Nvidia smuggling all these graphics cards and find legal ways to make it easy for them in the U.S. to make money, but whatever. NVIDIA ProBug. Again, so now this was a huge deal. This exploded that there was a virtualization reset bug in professional NVIDIA graphics cards. And I've seen reports of people saying even in the professional setting, NVIDIA's, their drivers they're not as good as AMD. They're not as stable.
Yeah, that's bad.
I don't know. Again, this isn't a full story. I don't know what else to say, but it's worth mentioning. Like, guys, seriously, AMD seems to have better drivers now. Like, and that should be a major factor in your graphics purchasing decision, even in the professional market. Now, this one I saw from Bloomberg, they are exclusively reporting, supposedly, that Nintendo, the reason the Switch 2 launch was a year later than it should have been is developers asked them to delay it so their games would be ready. So here's what I will say. I reached out to 2 developers about this before we started recording. Does this make any sense to you, this Bloomberg report? And they said, if that's true, it's sure as shit isn't third party. They still won't give dev kits to third parties. And then they both agreed with me. And also their launch lineup was crap. So I don't know. To me, if that's true, this is just Nvidia. I always do
Nintendo.
that. This is Nintendo. Just something's off with the leadership there.
Yeah, I don't get what's happening there.
Like they delayed it this much to have games ready. The games aren't. Mario Kart 8, Mario Kart World wasn't well received. Really, it seems to be floundering.
They had to
and Donkey Kong got good reviews, but that's it for a Donkey Kong and a mediocre open world Mario Kart. I mean, that's why we delayed this a year. And here's also why I don't buy that. They had a huge lineup of games coming out about a year ago that they could have just made Switch 2 cross-gen games. That doesn't make any sense.
True. Yeah. They had to program that cow, Tom. That cow that I'm so obsessed with.
That cow?
In Mario Party World, or in Mario Kart World.
What's the cow?
I
don't know this.
I brought it up a few times when we first talked about the Switch 2 because I thought it was funny how, like, in the ad they were like, and now there's a cow driver. And I was like, okay, cool, Nintendo.
Yeah, kind of like a Scott Aukerman-esque thing you keep bringing up because it's like, yes, but we do need to talk about why they thought it was a big deal.
But there was a cow. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I understand now. I don't remember this at all.
Well,
bringing this up,
hopefully some listener / viewer remembers it, or else this joke is flat.
I don't know. We're going to see. I'm a little nervous about this episode, everybody. Let us know how we did this time, because I think we're a little all over the place today, but sometimes that's our best episodes. Techno writes in, if you today had a limited budget of $300 for a CPU, what would you go for? And let's just say your mate owns a PC store and is going to give you a free motherboard. I'm just talking about the CPU cost. Well, I mean, that's impossible because you always have to factor in the platform. But I guess if I humor you, Techno, he says your options are therefore like a 7600X 3D, a used 7900X, a used 7800X 3D, a new 265K, or a new 9700X. Well, not the 9700X.
Probably a 7800X 3D, right?
Is this going to be used for gaming? If it is, yeah, I would get the 7800X 3D over the 265K. And, that's me ignoring the platform issues. But I have to say, you can't. You have to take into consideration the platform. And if you do, I would want the 265K to just be faster. And it might be. Again, let's say Arrow Lake Refresh comes with the 365K. You can get it for $350. It drops to $300. And APO and that other 10% boost make it a little faster than a 7800X 3D at gaming. Sure, then I recommend it. Like, that is where I go, fine. I would recommend that to anyone who's not an enthusiast, simply because its multi-threading performance will be wildly higher. And if it beats it in gaming, there's really no argument for the 7800X 3D except for platform longevity. But that, again, even then, that would probably only be to people that aren't me, that I know will never upgrade their CPU. But if they won't upgrade their CPU, then of course it's better at everything. Now I can recommend it. It's just right now I have to take into account the platform, and if I do, I'm just going to recommend the 7800X 3D.
Yeah.
All right. Daniel Martingano writes in and says, hi, guys. Do you think that the recent government investment in Intel and the seemingly consistent access to government support, given its position as an American tech company with both a foundry and a wide spectrum of offerings, will help Intel's graphics roadmap for consumer and enthusiast systems? Or do you think this will just fortify the enterprise side of the company? I imagine that this alone cannot resurrect the ARC dedicated GPU roadmap. Sorry for stubbornly keeping the hope alive, even though you tend to swat us away every time we ask. But is there even a small amount of hope that ARC will not be scrapped as a result? And this is, I guess, its own leak. I recently heard that they might lay off a substantial amount of the team again. And right now, I was told that their team is about the 10th the size of the Radeon GPU team. if they lay off any more people than
Jesus.
this is a maintenance crew. This is, this is
Yeah.
these people aren't building a spaceship. They're just keeping the lights on.
And I
It's not going
imagine
anywhere.
the U.S. government, who knows how coherent whatever stake they're taking in Intel is. I imagine the desire is to bolster the fab side of the company over the
Yes.
GPU division. I don't think the GPU division is what the U.S. government's most concerned with.
No. I think I absolutely agree. I think they want U.S. manufacturing, despite killing and high-end manufacturing in Georgia recently. So I'm not sure how legit that is a
And
want.
the U.S.
The
not
US
really
government.
even having the workforce to do this
it.
type of manufacturing yet. But whatever. We've talked about that on a die stream.
It's
before.
one of those things. Step 1, step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit. Okay, I guess we'll see where the question mark is at some point here, or maybe there isn't any answer. But yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be about the manufacturing. It's going to be about, and I do think this might happen. I think it's going to be Nintendo Switch 2s, maybe PlayStation 6s, the food stamp US edition made at Intel fabs with worse efficiency than the European market. I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to start making consoles on these things and probably some budget iPhones. And I think that's what the government wants more so than really caring about if Intel makes their own graphics cards, personally. Bullethead writes in, how do you structure the conditions for the U.S. government's 10% stake investment in Intel? I do agree that Intel doesn't need more fabs, but if the fab buildings already exist, how about using them for other purposes like packaging and PCB? Yeah, I mean, look, most of the money in that fab is for like the EUV equipment and all the stuff you need to make silicon. But I would agree, actually, it would be smart if some of these fabs Intel was going to be building in Ohio. I don't know what the status is on them. I don't think they're going very well. A lot of those should be changed into like PCB, cheaper stuff with like heat sinks, the stuff that is the real reason we have to make things in China, which isn't because TSMC is close to them. It's because the entire supply chain for everything else that makes a phone or a console or a laptop, the chassis, the screen, all of that's there. Yeah, I mean, I think if someone actually was smart in charge, they would be restructuring what Intel's buildings are, because they don't need more fabs. They need more manufacturing to support the stuff that also makes products with the things that come out of fabs.
Yeah, I'm curious, though, if Intel would be maybe I'm wrong if Intel's the best investment.
But that's my point, too. It doesn't need to be
Honeywell or something.
Yeah, Honeywell, Foxconn, TSMC, just have them actually, like, remember when Foxconn said they're going to build the big facility in Wisconsin? Everyone clapped and they didn't do a fucking thing. Like, I would suggest instead of worrying about Intel, the U.S. government should actually hold any of these companies to account for when they say they're going to move manufacturing here. And they never do. Like, but it's like, well, what are you more interested in, saying you got a deal done or actually getting the deal done? So far, the U.S. government seems to want to LARP doing deals and never seems to follow up on if Foxconn actually builds something in Wisconsin. AI generated fish writes in and says, with CES around the corner, it's hard to believe that already, I can't think of a single thing laptop enthusiasts have to be excited about in 2026. My assumption is, like with Lovelace, the Blackwell Super Refresh will not be a thing. Are OEMs still going to be allergic to AMD GPUs in 2026? Probably. Do we have to wait for Medusa Halo until there's an alternative to NVIDIA? Yeah, so I didn't have a couple other questions submitted by AI-generated fish. This is I would say, the resident AMD laptop crank who's mad that Strix Halo laptops are not $800 and made by every single company.
I'm sorry.
What I would say is, look, guys, AMD's laptop revenue is exploding. It's way up. They're making record profits in laptop and taking market share. Again, we have this conversation every year, Dan. Why is AMD failing laptop? They're fucking record revenue in client, dude. They are not failing laptop. They just are a smaller company than Intel, and it takes time to get to where you want them to be.
They're not failing. They would be what you would call growing.
Yes, they just still not the size of Intel. They're not. They're still not the size of Intel, guys. I know we all act like Intel's gone out of business and AMD replaced them. They have not. They do not have most of the market. They still are the underdog. AMD is still the underdog. So until they get to, like, honestly 60% market share or until they get to at least 50% market share and it's not even about 60, and have been there for multiple years, which won't happen until a couple of years from now, it's going to be the same thing as like new AMD laptops take a while to get into the market. But look at all of these Strix Halo announcements. Multiple $1,000 laptops, supposedly mini PCs, a handheld. Ask me this question, AI generated fish, in 8 months, because I think we're going to see way more Strix Halo products, including laptops by them. And so to actually answer your question and to stop ranting, look, I don't know. Hopefully Panther Lake will end up well. Gorgon Point's going to be like Hawk Point probably, and Medusa Point will come out before the end of next year. So I think it's going to be very 2024 like, in that on paper it doesn't seem that great, but we had awesome laptop offerings. Minis Forum made a Surface competitor. Sometimes it's more important that the laptops that you could have gotten a year ago are just cheaper. And I think that's what we can look forward to next year.
True.
Is much cheaper Strix Halo, much cheaper Strix Point, much cheaper Kraken laptops. And then that to push down prices further. And then at least Panther Lake will hopefully be better than Lunar Lake, I guess. I don't freaking know what to expect anymore. I don't know. But, so
Panther
I
Lake
think
will exist, maybe. Who knows?
If I may, and thank you for your support, AI generated fish. If I may say, you are the laptop crank of Moore's Law is Dead. 2025 might be an ideal year, a banner year for what you want, in that what's more important, new things get announced in a PowerPoint, or you can actually buy them. I think next year is going to be the year where it's going to be easier to get all of these cutting edge APUs. So
true.
That's what you can look forward to. That's what I think.
Actually being able to buy things.
And I guess on the Nvidia Super thing, we'll see. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a refresh now that I think about it. Because they have a real problem with VRAM. They have a performance problem with their cards performing badly because of VRAM. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they launch a 50, 60, 12 gigabyte, 50, 80, 12 gigabyte to laptop. I actually think, now that I say that out loud, it would be common sense they will. We'll see. Yeah. All right, Dan. That is all of the questions and remaining stories that we had to discuss. Any final words?
I don't think so.
Well, I know we're both tired as always once we finish one of these shows, so I will waste no more time. But to shill the channel, as I always do, please, right now, if you're still watching, that means you're a big fan if you listen this long. Like it, and make sure you're subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring the bell button. Also, make sure your phone, on whatever podcast app you have, is subscribed to Broken Silicon, and give us a review on your podcast app. That helps a lot too. We're part of a podcast network now, the Believe Podcast Network, BLEAV. And so there's revenue that comes in from that. So subscribing to that, downloading that, giving us a review on podcast apps, that helps us boost the other stratum of how we get new fans. It's not all just YouTube. And then, of course, consider supporting us on Patreon. The lowest tier gets access to guest questions, gets access to a catalog of die strings. A new one just came out that's like a bonus 1.5 hour Broken Silicon. Higher tiers can ask questions, and all die strings get access to double the die strings a month. Higher tiers get access to ad-free Broken Silicon and free questions for loose ends. So if you want to ask us questions like Steve when he comes on, join the Patreon. And also note that Brian Heemskirk, a developer, actually has a fun new game coming out he wants to promote, has a lot to say about the next gen consoles, and he will be the next guest. So if you want to ask a professional game dev questions about the PlayStation 6, join the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon and you'll be able to. Otherwise, Dan, I already asked if you had any final words. You didn't seem to. So, you know what? Shut the hell up, and everybody have a great rest of your week. Not you, Dan.
Fine. Bye.
Fine. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carbon Cry and Carrie No Sugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and John Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong, we love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guests questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Z Jits, Daniel D, Dick, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Toka, Daniel Hyde, MJB1, GZ Ziggy, SNES Chalmers, Jerem Ferriero, Compressed iBox, Falco Malev, Jensen Wang, Gregorius Acker, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Hal Buma, Shredbird, Sammy Malas, The Boss Haas, Chrysanthenos, Tommy, Jonathan, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Amiable Chief, Slicky, Ishud, Gamers Unite, Meat and Pork, Ian Clifford, Tim Robb, Travis Gooding, Mad, Zoot Suit Taylor, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cake, Stephen Coates, Mark Mitchell, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, Cole Addict, Win Wang, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Windstar, Little Germany, James I. Raider, Shay, Milton, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Justin Bustle, John Swin, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Harlan, Jansen, Angema, Joseph Kelly, Slushba, Brian Wright, Sisyphos771, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, Alex Vega, Michael Cozy, Crystal Joe, Elbergun, Kikum, Solarized 80, Sprutnik, Brian P, Hootat 42, Corinster 671, Penta Winta, State Farm Snake, Hal Richard, Omega Doge, John Wick, Boomstick, Mr. Tiger, Hugo Under Kiwi, Penguins Love AI, Porcelain Oats, Matthew Cassell, AI Soldier 789, Curry King 3, Nick Zuzmania, Bespoke exclamation point, Smash Axley, Fred Burger, Kareem Al Masri, Rahil Shibulls, Kevin Coots, Armand Vacatura, Manolis Ragkusis, Kalon Reichel, Jonathan Harris, Danielle Martigano, Elusive Man, Kainush Kagani, Johnny Trans, Zubar Ahmed, Born Toft, Josh, Angel of Cake, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.